And the greenhouse is obviously gone, but the house that was in front of it is still there. Somewhere in my collection that I was not able to find, I have a picture from 1911 of a baseball game being played from a glass plate negative, being played in that location. And Dutton Street used to go all the way through to Oak back then. Okay, quick. How many of you are from Vine or are raised in Vine? Oh, wow. Cool. I thought it'd be more than that. That's pretty cool. Okay, this is another picture, and the kids have calmed down just a little bit. But I just love this, just seeing all the people gathered together and knowing that this whole thing was happening without amplifiers or anything. You know, I mean, they were just speaking loudly and clearly, elocution. And then the Kalamazoo High School at that point was two buildings. One was the technical trade school, and the other was the regular high school. Glorious things. I mean, geez, they're really not going to accommodate 20th century learning styles, but boy, they were awful handsome looking. And with high ceilings, so you could open the upper windows and let the hot air go out in the summer, that kind of thing, you know, before we had air conditioning. And this is a picture from, when they built New Central, they built it in chunks. And you can see the wall ends right there. And so this is the Vine Street section that was built first, about 1911. That was the first one. And then they built the other section and the auditorium. After the Academy of Music burned, they built the auditorium because Kalamazoo needed a performance venue that was of high enough professional quality to still attract the same sort of acts that we did. So we stopped having vaudeville through our auditorium and started having more classical acts. But one of the things that they had, and that I bought a replication of lately, is they had a guest book where the artist would sign in, and I believe that Paderewski and Pavlova are two of the names in that. You know, and many, many, many other people, like, you know, National Geographic. I just got back from a trip to Zanzibar, and I'm doing a speech about it with glass slides, and that kind of thing would happen all the time as well. But there were lots and lots and lots of people that did that. And then this is the building when it was complete. This was this picture was taken, I believe, in like the early 40s by Mamie Austin. And this is the whole front of the building. The symphony, that's foreshortening, right? Okay, because the lawn's wider than that. You kind of wonder when you see the pictures, did they move the road? No, it's just foreshortening, it's okay. Now, I was talking about houses being moved. These are 4 that I've identified so far as definitely having been moved. You've already seen the Justice Burdick house here. This little house on, this was moved. It's currently sitting facing Walnut Street behind the red Dutch colonial revival that's on the corner of Walnut and Park Street. And when the folks built this house, they just sort of turned it around the corner and put it there and then built their new house, got it out of the way. Not unusual at all. Along Davis Street, if you're ever walking along Davis and you look across from East Campus and you see down some of the driveways, you'll see these little humble homes behind the larger Craftsman era, 1904, 1910, 4 squares that are there. What happened was when the college came in, people started being a little more prosperous, and so they'd take the old house, move it down to the back of the lot, rent it to students, and then they'd build themselves a new house on the street front. And there's probably, I think, 6 or 7 of those right along there. They're hard to get good pictures of without going into people's private property, so I don't have good pictures of them. This one I found in an old city record that had been moved from somewhere around Water Street. And this one, again, was moved. The dates are correct, but they were moved quite a distance because people just moved houses. Now, they apparently spent a lot of time really uglifying it in the 1970s. That is burnt barnwood siding, which of course is so authentic for the middle of a city. This is the one that I was saying. This is when we were working at the studio, and this gentleman brought in these negatives that his great uncle had shot on his trip back to Kalamazoo from Wyoming. And he had this wide format panoramic camera that took these wide pictures. Some of his pictures from Wyoming were vertical, showing the sluices down the mountain, which were kind of neat. But this was, he just went around taking pictures of friends and people that he knew. Well, the Wells family had just finished their new house at 736 Wheaton. And so you can still see there's this wooden plank sidewalk, because that's what you did then. And he actually went whole hog and actually ran it out about 12, 15 feet from the house there, because there wasn't any sidewalk yet. This house is still there. That was the Waltons were living there at that time. And right there between her and that house is where my house is today. Anyway, this house is still there, and that little girl was my babysitter when I was little. That's Helen. And it was just so funny because he brought these negatives in, and once we printed them, I looked and looked, that looks so familiar. I was living next door at the house at the time. The house that doesn't exist yet was right next door. And I said, that's, so it was just absolutely, I was absolutely tickled to see that. And then this is Helen. This is an article from the Gazette from the 1970s. This is Helen Welch. She lived in this house her entire life, except just after the First World War, after Turkey became a secular state under Jamal Ataturk, she went to Turkey with her mother as her chaperone to be an exchange teacher in English. And she spent 3 or 4 years there. Then she came back home, and then she went up to Calumet, where she taught in the high school up in the UP for many years, until her mother, when she was ailing, she came back home to take care of her mom in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s. And then she lived there for the rest of her life until she died in 82, 83, something like that. And she was the Avon lady for the neighborhood, and she was on her bike. She was everywhere. She never married, and she had the best time all the time. She made things. She had toys that she made or that her dad made for her. We'd go over and play with them. She had an old hand crank phonograph where you'd put these big discs on, and it was just an adventure to go over to Helen's house and have her take care of you for the day. I just absolutely loved it. And she also would hire neighborhood kids to do work for her. Now this is in her backyard. They're digging up a tree. I know that because that's my garage, was my garage. And they're digging up, obviously you can see some big tree, but she had that whole backyard planted up in a garden. And most of her food she grew right there in a garden because she didn't need flowers and stuff, and it's a huge yard for this part of the neighborhood. I'm wondering whether maybe that might be the first time she really planted the big garden as a victory garden. So it might even be a little bit later than the date I've tacked on there of 1935. It might be the early 40s after we got into the war. Because that's her style. That's the sort of thing she'd do. But I just, there they are, hacking away at it. This is the church that I mentioned before that's on the site of the KPEP. And that burned in the 60s, I believe. Although the back part of this church that was added in the 50s is still part of the KPEP facility that's there. Because they didn't, the rest of the church had been very damaged in a fire. This is the old children's home that was on the corner of Ranney and South Westnedge, where the laundromat is now. I remember that when I was little, okay, and I didn't understand things, I thought that was the coolest place to live because they had their own really big swing set. And I loved really tall swing sets, and they had one in their yard they could use any time. I didn't understand that they were all orphans at that point in time, you know, so or from distressed families.
Wasn't there one at Westnedge and Vine?
No, this is Westnedge and Ranney, just one block down.
Okay.
Yeah.